to log on, and then we'll begin. I hope everyone had a really good Thanksgiving. I'm sorry we weren't on yesterday. Didn't really matter much anyway because my power was flickering in and out for the most part. So I am here today with hot green tea because apparently I just turned like 77 or something like that. I switched. I stopped drinking coffee and went to green tea instead. And I don't know why I felt really, really jumpy when I drank coffee. And I was like, uncomfortable. So I just switched to green tea, and it's been about 2 weeks, and it's worked out well. Somebody just texted me, am I on the air? I am on the air. I'll text her yes. So hopefully everyone can see me and join our podcast, and we can talk. So I'm Steve Mazzacane. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. If everybody can hear me for some reason. Ray, how are you? How is Alaska? Ray, people know the situation. Ray Ingraham is the Republican majority leader on the RTM, and his son-in-law had a terrible accident in Alaska. And, Ray's a friend of mine, so maybe I'm a little biased here, but here's what happened. A terrible accident happened to his son-in-law. He has grandkids out there. What was it? The next day, I was bringing him to the airport at like 4 a.m. He's been out there. Ray, how long have you been out in Alaska now? You can answer that when you hear that. But he's been in Alaska. The family's been in Alaska. I saw Christina went out to Alaska. It is amazing seeing the pictures online of what a really close family looks like, and everybody coming out in supporting a family like that, going through that difficult time. They're all Brantford connections. Ray raised 3 girls here in Brantford with his wife. They all live in Brantford. One obviously was in the military in Alaska, but Ray's a friend, so I'm biased. But it's amazing to see the family support and what they all did going across the country. And you've been in Alaska for 3 months with your daughter and son-in-law and your grandkids, and that is amazing. And so seeing his progress on Facebook, if you're not seeing it, I'm sure you could just go to Ray's Facebook page and follow him, friend him. I'm sure he'll say yes, and see the updates, and they're really amazing, and it's great to see. And it's great to see the Brantford connection there. So glad to have you on, Ray. So the first thing we'll talk about today is a stimulus package. You have the whole family out. The pictures are amazing. Every time Ray posts a new picture of Alaska, there's another family member there. So I think there are more family members in the Ingraham family in Alaska right now than there are in Connecticut. And that's a response to the accident, certainly, but it's a great thing to see. And, that's just good to see. Ray's a really, really good guy. And I'm proud to have him as a friend. Renee, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for joining. We'll talk a little bit about the stimulus, and I want to talk more about Netflix today because I watched the Queen's Gambit over the weekend, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We don't always have to be politics. When we first started, we talked about a ton of different stuff from sports. I do still talk about stocks a little bit, but we'll talk about Netflix a little bit too. So while you're watching, if you have some ideas of the next show we should be binge watching after the Queen's Gambit, let us know, comment on it, and I want to talk about that. I need some ideas. Over the weekend, we'll watch that. Vinny Noble, good to see you. So first of all, some update on the stimulus package. And I have been I've been hard on Mitch McConnell. And every single time I think to myself, I'm being a little bit too hard on Mitch McConnell, he does something that says, you're not hard enough. I mean, not that believe me, Mitch McConnell is spending zero amount of time worried about what some guy in Brantford thinks. So I don't think I have any impact on that. But from those wondering what's going on here, the guy is absolutely ridiculously unreasonable. And I'll tell you what happened today. So a bipartisan group of legislators came up with another plan. So right now, Nancy Pelosi's last proposal was about $2.2 trillion. And it had $600 in unemployment aid, had an additional $1,200 payments, all the good stuff. There was some other stuff that probably didn't need to be in there that was in there. Certainly state and local agencies to debate over. But a lot of money was going out. And quite frankly, with the way Corona is working now and seeing the impact to a lot of these businesses, something has to happen. Mitch McConnell put forth a $500 billion deal, which he knew would never pass anybody. And it didn't. Didn't do anything close. It didn't have the $1,200 payments. It didn't have, I think it extended unemployment to a very small amount. And one of the big sticking points between the parties is legal protections for businesses. So Republicans are saying, wait a minute. And I kind of agree with this, not completely, but agree with it, is that somebody can go into a restaurant, get COVID 2 or 3 days later, somehow say it was the restaurant's fault and blame the restaurant. And with this, COVID tracing and going back to where you were and who you were with and all these other things, businesses are going to be easy targets for attorneys to just pour on the lawsuits, and insurance rates will rise. It'll put a lot of businesses out. And so what the Republicans have said is, wait a minute, if we're going to partially open these restaurants, if we're going to partially open these businesses, we have to give them some at least temporary legal protections. I agree with that. What the Democrats are saying is, wait a minute, we don't want to give an excuse to business owners to not do the things they're supposed to do, to not properly clean, to not make sure everybody's wearing masks, to not do all those aspects. So you have two sides to this, and I get it. It's not, where is my hands or the camera? So there are two sides to this, and that's a big sticking point. So you have $2.2 trillion from the Democrats, $0.5 trillion from Mitch McConnell. There was some give between the Democrats and Mnuchin, which is the Trump administration, to get under $2 trillion, but not significant. I think it was $1.9 trillion. In any event, a bipartisan proposal came out today. And I'll read you some of the things that are in this. $908 billion, so still under $1 trillion. They have not gotten the backing of the congressional leaders yet. Let's look what's in this. It's in between the other ones. The proposal includes $160 billion in state and local aid, so some, a lot less than Pelosi's, but some. $180 billion in additional unemployment insurance, and $288 billion for small businesses. So that's the pandemic borrowing program that they have in there. Has $82 billion for schools as well, and $45 billion for transportation, according to a draft. It includes money for healthcare. Usually, the healthcare money is how do we give money, the stimulus, the vaccine out quickly. From what I'm reading, the unemployment benefits would extend to March, and it would add $300 to the unemployment. So if you get unemployment right now, the problem you have is most people are at that 39 weeks. So from March, the beginning of March to now, you're reaching the end. I believe December 12th is a key date where people will lose. If you were self-employed getting unemployment or getting regular unemployment, you'll lose a lot of that between there and the end of the year. So a lot of those people will have no money coming in. The argument against that by the Republicans has often been people are just deliberately not going back to work. I don't think that's the case. We haven't seen that. When the $600 ended, it wasn't like suddenly everybody ran back to work. Just people are not hiring as much. So there's certainly a need for something, but Mitch McConnell has said he will not bring either the $2.2 trillion or even the $908 billion to the floor. And just to give you a little bit of perspective. So we had Mitt Romney was a presidential candidate against Obama in his second term. And I certainly put Mitt Romney as a moderate, not far right in any way, shape, or form. Certainly socially, he's a Mormon, so on abortion, things like that he is. But in general, and here's his quote. It is simply unacceptable for us to not respond in this circumstance. Now, I happen to be a deficit hawk. I don't like borrowing money. I don't like spending money we don't have. But the time to borrow money, maybe the only time to borrow money, is when there's a crisis, said Senator Mitt Romney. I could not agree more with what he's saying. And here's why. This is why this idea of tax cuts is often so stupid. When times are good, you don't give money away. That's when you build your coffers. If you're a deficit hawk, if you don't want to take on debt, even those people have to realize when there's a crisis, that's when you take on debt. If a hurricane smashes into your house and destroys your house, you don't want to, but you take on debt to fix your house. If your car breaks down, you take on debt to buy a new car. There are times that you have to take on debt during times of crisis. And so I completely agree with Mitt Romney that now is the time to do that. Where I disagree with Mitt Romney is in when you give tax breaks. Why are we passing tax breaks when the economy was great in that first year under Trump? That's what's missing here. You can't say you're a deficit hawk and say we should borrow at this time if you're willing to cut back and take less revenue when the economy is good. When the economy is good is when people don't mind paying their taxes, when they're getting raises, when businesses are making more money. We see a strong economy. That's why tax cuts are the biggest. They're political points, but they're almost always nonsense. They don't work as planned. They don't stimulate the economy anywhere near what people think. And it puts you in a difficult position when there is a tough time. And so this idea that you can come in here like Trump did, we're going to give tax cuts in a good economy, and it's going to stimulate somehow more. Yeah, people had extra money, but it was already good. And so now you have a difficult time where the Republicans are saying, wait, suddenly we don't want to spend money. We have a deficit. You had a deficit when you had the tax cuts. The country was in deficit then. And instead of saying, let's take money and pay that down, you said, let's not get that money in. So the logic here is lost on me. And for Mitch McConnell, you're seeing something interesting. Romney's a senator. It's almost tied right now in the Senate. He won't even bring it up for a vote. If it brings it up for a vote, it'll pass. You could pick a few Republicans off to vote for this bill. McConnell won't even bring it up. So you're going to see something interesting happen around Christmas and just after Christmas as unemployment benefits end. Right now, a lot of small businesses are struggling. Less people are spending money. Their outside eating areas for restaurants are not there. Shopping has moved in this last 6-7 months to online. Small groceries, small stores, small gift shops, all those sort of things, all struggling. And they were held up by that stimulus package. That's $600 because, as we've said many, many times, people who don't have money, when you give them $20, what do they do with that $20? They spend it. When you give them $600, they spend it. They may pay their rent, they may pay some bills, but they spend it. They don't save it. And so that helps stimulate an economy. So now you lost the $600, so now they're just on unemployment. So now it'll be $200, $300, $400 they're getting on unemployment. And you're going to lose that at the end of December. And apparently Mitch McConnell just doesn't give a damn. And so you're going to see a kind of a nightmare scenario happen unless something happens quickly. The $500 billion plan doesn't do anything for the general public. It doesn't help. And then you have that stalemate of, do you give legal protections for businesses? And in this $908 billion plan, let me pull this up one more time. The idea, instead of giving like 2 years of legal protections, which the Republicans wanted, they give it about 3 months, which is interesting because these states, they put a lot of pressure on states to start passing their own legal protection plans for businesses if they do it all. So states like, Connecticut, which is a very, very blue state, Democrats may not want to pass anything. The idea is that if you give protections to business owners, they may be not as diligent in taking care of the things they're supposed to take care of. And that may be viewed as not taking care of their employees, not making sure their employees are healthy. And Democrats almost always side on the side of labor. So they would be likely against that. Connecticut may have no protections for those sort of things. I don't know the answer to that for sure. I haven't talked to any representatives yet. But if it goes down to every state, you'll have 50 different plans. But that's what this kind of bipartisan plan does, is it gives you that shorter option. So it's interesting, this back and forth. At the end of the day, Mitch McConnell doesn't want to play ball. And this is why Georgia means so much. If it's tied, if the Democrats can win those 2 seats, it's tied. The tiebreaker is a Democrat, the vice president, and the Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. The other side of that is that one-party rule. And that's not been something that's always ended well. So there are 2 sides to this very interesting story, but it's interesting to see how an election can impact so many different decisions. What happens in Georgia will impact what happens with the stimulus. What happens with a stimulus will impact legal protections for towns by state. It'll impact money that people have for those businesses. And there's all these small little recurring events that happen, dominoes that fall, that affect the average person. And right now, the person blocking this, and it really seems like the only person blocking this, is Mitch McConnell. Because I have a hard time believing if a $2 trillion plan passed, that Donald Trump wouldn't sign it. Because the states that voted for him are probably the states that are going to use this the most. That's where the economy has been hit very, very hard. And if Donald Trump is anything, he's typically loyal to those that voted for him. He's loyal to his followers. So I can see an argument being made and him signing that as something like, hey, I'm going to be your hero before I leave. So if Mitch doesn't bring it up, will it affect the vote in Georgia? I don't know the answer to that, Mary. Here's the question on voters. Does the average voter understand the impacts of what they're voting for? And I can tell you from my personal experience, people typically vote for somebody they like. It doesn't always have anything to do with what are their policies. There's bumper sticker politics and they yell stuff out, low taxes, that sort of thing. But in general, they vote for somebody that they like. So those candidates down there, both Republicans are going to be favored, and they're likely going to win at least one of them. But in general, the public does not understand the real repercussions of what happens with your vote. And, to those people who have jobs and haven't lost their job, it may not be as important to them because they may not understand the repercussions of people having money to spend. You have a job, that's great, but those small businesses you're relying on that are staying open, that feed you lunch and that have grocery stores and that have gifts for holidays, they may not be open if more people don't have money in their pocket to spend. And my philosophy on economics is when you have a bad time, when the economy is bad, that's when you take on debt and spend money. When the economy is good, you tax, raise money, and you save. As a country, we have typically not saved when times were good, and then still borrow when times were bad. And that's why we get into the mess that we're into. Okay, let's talk about more happy stuff. So I don't know how many of you watched The Queen's Gambit. And I bring this up because I kind of had a heated discussion on it the other day. And I'm really mixed on it on the show. Sorry, we have a lot of text coming in for some reason. But the show is it's fictional. If you saw like the Searching for Bobby Fischer type movies, or there was one with Tobey Maguire recently on chess, it's about a young girl who's an orphan, deals with a lot of things, losing her parents, the substance abuse, a lot of different heavy issues in there, but she plays chess. And I am not a chess player, but certainly it's a brilliant sport. It's unbelievable. And it's a really good show. But if you have seen it, I'd love to get your opinion on it and what the next thing we should binge watch, either as a podcast audience or as a town, or that I should binge watch. It was good. So here's my thoughts on Queen's Gambit. It starts off very strong. In the middle, it gets kind of meandering. It's kind of going all over the place. People that weren't in her life start showing up kind of like completely out of the blue. Like it doesn't make like one main character shows up that she played earlier and is just there for 2 episodes. I don't know how that happened. There's other characters that come back and help, and then they fight. So it kind of takes a soap opera turn where it's like, what's going on here? And then it comes back with probably one of the best final episodes of any show I've ever seen. And it's really one of those ends on a high note. So my viewpoint is that people think it's better than it actually is. It was kind of meandering for me. But the final episode is spectacular. And I think there's only 7 or 8 episodes, so it's worth a watch. If it rains one day this week or on the weekend or something, and you haven't seen it, take a look. But a very good show that no one expected to be a good show. Like Netflix did nothing to promote it, and it just became a monster. I think 60 million views or something like that, they were saying. That number may be wrong, whatever it was. But so I need a new show. And I don't know what that should be. So I was debating going back and watching Game of Thrones from the beginning again. Not sure I want to do that. I watch The Office pretty much every day, so I don't want to watch that anymore. So we need some new suggestions. So if you don't have any today, for tomorrow's podcast, if you have suggestions, let me know. So on that note, I don't have a lot of other topics to talk about today. I just wanted to make sure I came on because we did come on yesterday, and I get some very interesting messages that come in if I don't come on. So I'm sorry. I know apparently no one has watches or clocks in some of those houses. And when they get a thing that says, hey, Brantford 7's live, they know it's 4:00. So Sons of Anarchy I heard was good. I've never watched it. The Undoing. So The Undoing is the one with Hugh Grant, I think, right? And I read an article on it today. Yeah, I guess I could try that out. How many episodes is The Undoing? I don't like to watch stuff that's like 10 episodes. If it's 4 or 5 episodes, I can get into it. I know Sean Scanlon makes sure I want to have to watch The Wire season 3. I have not started that yet. our agreement that he watches Yellowstone season 2, and I have to watch The Wire season 3. So I can't have him on for an interview again until I finish that third episode of. Okay, Sons of. Okay, how long is Sons of? It's like multiple seasons, right? So Sons of Anarchy is something you got to watch for months. Undoing is 6. All right, I can do Undoing. We've gone way back to Mad Men because there's nothing on. John, we ran out of stuff. Everybody watched. So remember when this virus first started? We all watched. What was the white trash people? The guy with the lions or the tigers? What was that show called? I don't remember. So Jackie, I'm responding to comments here. How many seasons is? I'm gonna look this up. Sons of Anarchy. Sons of Anarchy has, holy crap, 7 seasons, and there's 13 episodes. There's 92 total episodes. So that's 920 hours. Oh, Tiger King, yeah. 920 hours of Sons of Anarchy. I didn't watch it when it was on. My son made me watch it a few years ago. I watched it twice at Tiger King. Okay, yeah, Tiger King watched. You know, it's funny. We have all spent so many hours watching these shows. The total number of hours Sons of Anarchy is 92. You know what? Let's look at just to put this in perspective. Game of Thrones seasons had 8 seasons, 6 episodes. Total number of episodes, it varied from like 6 to 10, right? So I'm guessing there were about 75, 76 episodes of Game of Thrones. So 750 hours. No, what am I talking about? 75 hours. Yeah, my numbers are off. My math is terrible. But 75 hours. I mean, that's, holy cow. 3 full days of watching one show. And we've all watched so many shows. I think we had to go back to what we did as kids and kind of count the hours that we watched TV. I mean, I have the TV on all the time because CNBC is on, but I think if we stopped watching TV for a week or two and found other things to do, it might be pretty incredible. Shania, my husband, said Britannia was good on Epix. What is Epix? Oh, that's a channel. That's right. I've seen that before. Miss Maisel. So, Mary, I was recommended Miss Maisel. I got through like 4 or 5 episodes. It was funny. I wasn't blown away by it, but it was, it's hard to find. There was one show that I really laughed a lot called Sex Education. I thought that was pretty funny. But it's hard to find in these miniseries shows that are really funny. There was one that was about space with Steve Carell that wasn't funny at all. If I want funny, I go back to The Office. But I got to take a look at what Britannia was. I hadn't heard of that. Okay. And the other show I did watch was, oh, God. It was on Netflix. It was about like Ireland in the beginning of the century or something like that. It was okay. All right. In any event, Tiger King I've already watched. I think people are really big on Sons of Anarchy. So I have to start. I'll watch 1 or 2 episodes of Sons of Anarchy. The space show was awful. Yeah, it was not good at all, Renee. But we need some good recommendations. And actually, talking about Steve Carell, a movie came out with him about politics that was god awful as well. And I was one of the people who spent so now they have first run movies on TV that you can get for I think $20. And I was like, do I want to spend $20? But then I thought to myself, if I went to a movie, 2 tickets to a movie is $25, $30 anyway. So what difference does it make? So I ordered it. It was god awful. It's on, I don't know what it's on now, but it was terrible. But in any event. Okay. So if there are topics people want to talk about, there's not a lot going on. There's no, big tree lighting in parade this year in Brantford. There's everything's pretty much at a standstill. We've had a really nice little program where the farm to table program. We've been putting boxes of food, giving out to families. That's been really amazing and like really loaded boxes of stuff. So if you need stuff and need food, we'll be posting when those things are going to be happening again. But from a news perspective, not a ton of stuff going on. And so until we get something on a stimulus package or Biden really takes office. I'd imagine the day Biden takes office, we're going to have a million things. Will be a lot executive actions, a lot of undoing of some of the things Trump did in that first week. So we'll have a lot to talk about. But we are going to keep you updated on the stimulus because I think that's what's impacting most people, and a lot of businesses locally are worried about that passing in some way, shape, or form. I am going to try in the next few weeks to have on our representatives, Christine Cohen and Robin Comey. We'll talk about the upcoming session. One thing I am working on that I will propose to any elected official who wants is something about financial literacy and teaching basic finances at a younger age. That's kind of a passion of mine. I think it needs to be something to be done. I think finance is the great equalizer. If we can teach kids to start saving money and the benefits of compound interest and saving and getting ahead from a young age, it doesn't matter what race you are. Money speaks louder than any color. And if we can teach people to save money, to invest, to make that part of our life, they can get ahead and get much further in buying property, and that generational problems that we have with economics can go away. So I'm passionate about that, and hopefully we can get some support for that once we get some kind of writing. And that's my fault. I have to write up something that makes sense and is actually passable. Then I'll probably pass it on to Robin or to Christine or Sean, and hopefully they can do something. But that's really it for now. So we'll come back tomorrow if there are topics, if there are questions that people have. I do know there are letters going around about issues in Brantford. They're all starting from the same people. They're nonsense. They're ridiculous. I have to give Ray Graham some credit for kind of ending that in the last RTM meeting. Some of these meetings, if you're watching, they're getting hijacked by the crazies. And it's awful. And I feel for Dennis Flanagan on the RTM who has to manage that. I feel for Jamie Cosgrove who has to manage that. These are good people who care about the town. And you just have people they're apparently their entire self-worth is in being an asshole. It's just being a jerk and going to meetings and yelling and screaming and hijacking the meeting seems to be what gives them some sense of value. That's sad, but the law is we have to give them time. They get a chance to speak, and they can lie and they can slander and they can make up whatever they want, but they get their time. And so to all those elected officials, give them their 3 minutes, then shut the camera off or shut the volume off and let them cry about it, because we're not getting the business of the town done as a small group of people try to hijack meeting after meeting after meeting. It's just getting crazy. And I'm not going to give all of their issues much credence. So I'm not going to spend a lot of podcasts on them because they're nonsense. And I've researched them all. I'm the person who's written about them all. So I know they're nonsense. If there's specific questions, if you've heard something, there's a specific question, ask me, I'll discuss it and explain why it's nonsense. But, one letter said the town was illegally misappropriating $6 million from one fund to another fund and wrote to the state to investigate the town. The Board of Finance chairman is the former head of DRS, which is the State Department of basically the state's IRS. The guy knows finance. We have a finance director in Jim Finch who knows what he's doing about. We have a first selectman with a degree in economics who knows what he's talking about. Nobody did anything wrong. And this is the crap that these people just keep throwing out there because they don't want solutions to problems. They don't actually want to discuss the problem. They want attention from being an asshole. And unfortunately, they're taking over a lot of the meetings. Michael Anthony, I'm on the Brantford-Guilford line. Anyone else think the weekly shoreline paper being delivered everywhere is becoming an eyesore? We've had people complain about that before. I know I get some warnings, but I don't know. I just think what's happening for print, I feel bad for them in some ways. There's just no demand for it anymore. So instead of paying for postage, they're coming and throwing it in your driveway. It's just the way the media is going right now. If they have to, I don't know who reads it. Most people don't read print. They just don't do it. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for some feedback. I'll tell you what, before next Monday's podcast, I will watch the first 2 episodes of Sons of Anarchy. And we can talk about it then. So if anybody hasn't watched it, wants to get started with me, you can watch the first 2 by next Monday. If not, and then I'll talk about it. Renee, any local businesses we may not be aware of that would be great places for holiday shopping? Well, for the first thing we can say is gift cards. So I work with the By the Sea Day Spa. They just started doing online gift cards, so you don't even have to go in. No shipping costs. You can print them out. So you can go to their website for that. I'll start with the businesses I work with. Obviously, Hornets Nest people know of. That's on all the time. They have their dinner program. So if you don't want to eat out, it's only $10 a dinner. You can get that from them. There is a new one company I spoke with yesterday. You may see them more on Brantford 7 is Shoreline Foods, or I'll tell you in a second. And why it's important is because right now everybody's using Uber Eats and Grubhub. And so there's a website called Shoreline Menus. And it's basically an Uber Eats or Grubhub, but a local company. So they don't have the same technological advantages Uber Eats have. They don't have an app, but they have a website. They have Hornets Nest. I think they have home restaurants on there. There's some other restaurants that are going on there. The difference there is if you're pushing to support local, then don't get local food from Uber Eats, right? Go to Shoreline Menus. Look up shorelinemenus.com. Order that way. And so you're supporting local in both where you're buying food from and the delivery service that you're using. So, and we'll talk more about that in the future. They're probably going to advertise or market with us. But we'll talk more about them. It's just a local option. They're not going to have all the advantages Uber's going to have. They don't have millions of dollars in investors that are, in Uber's case, billions of dollars of investors. But it is a locally owned, I think a restaurateur in Old Saybrook started it because there was a hole in delivery area, and it's kind of grown from there. So something to take a look at. Mark that on your webpage, and that's where you may want to order from. Anyway, I will see you all tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Again, any questions, send them in. Thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for commenting and sharing your TV viewing ideas. I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Guys, have a great night.